The views expressed by Paul during this podcast are his alone and do not necessarily reflect the views, opinions, or positions of his employer. The views expressed by Jason. Wait, dude, really? This is what you want me to read? Okay. The views expressed by Jason are his alone and frequently do not necessarily reflect reality. His opinions are often annoying, scattershot in their application, and can resemble more of a Virginia Woolf short story than a cohesive argument. He is currently undergoing therapy and rewatching Westworld Season 3 to resolve his storytelling issues.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Season 2 of F-Sides, that annoyingly award-lacking #1 cybersecurity podcast, according to Muscle Car Poetry magazine. And to be honest, the most money-losing not-for-profit venture that I think I've ever undertaken since starting an airline.
And instead of your typical reading off a list of things like the recent breaches or talking about shiny new technology, we try to focus on the human side of things, like leadership, communication, human behavior, stuff that moves the elephant, even if Muscle Car Poetry magazine does not agree with us on that approach sometimes.
Yeah, so moving the elephant is all about, psychology, about how do we change human behavior, and we really try to focus as much as we can on that in these episodes. Speaking of the worst segue ever, that was great.
Smooth.
Worst segue
Awesome.
ever. Paul, have you heard of a podcast called Smartless?
Yes, especially because I'm the one who mentioned it to you and brought it up to a few months ago. And it's
Really?
a great podcast.
That was you?
Wow.
Wow.
You acted like you didn't know what it was. So either you were being nice to me or, I don't know sometimes.
I often do not give you enough credit. Well, thank you for introducing me to that, because I love the show. And there's two things that I want to talk about that relate to today's show. One is, if you don't listen to it, you should check it out. It's Jason Bateman, Sean Hayes, and Will Arnett. These three guys have known each other from Hollywood for 20 years, and they'll bring on guests and just chat, have a good time, and it's funny. The one thing that they do is they bring on a secret guest where one person knows who it is and the others don't. Paul does not know who my guest is today. But now I'm going to give the second thing that they did. In the most recent episode, they got POTUS. So President Joe Biden was on the show, which was like this amazing, normally they're talking to their friends, actors, Hollywood stuff, and they're like flipping out that they got somebody as cool and as big as Joe Biden. Like it's their get. Well, this guest that we have on today is my get. He's my Joe Biden. I can't believe this guy is going to, now I just said it's a man, it's a dude, that this guy is going to be on my show. So I am very excited because I now have my Joe Biden on the show, and Paul does not know who he is.
Yeah, and I've not seen you this excited in a while, so it'll be interesting. I kind of have clues from our other conversations, but you've put us all in suspense long enough. Let's hear.
I want to give, I think they do this on Smartless. So I'm going to give some of the hints. Some of the hints are...
Oh, yes. Okay, sorry. Yes.
He has a 3-letter acronym called CEO. The company that he co-founded has its own Gartner acronym. If you're familiar with Gartner, they like giving out these 4 or 5 letter acronyms for technology space of Magic Quadrant. And literally, I'm actually going to ask him because I think his company invented the quadrant. But I'm going to find out. And what's my third quiz? The guy is just a really chill, cool dude, but that won't help you, Paul, because you don't know him.
Are you trying to say I don't know any chill, cool people who are CEOs?
Well,
that's...
You don't know this one.
You are underestimating me again, Jason.
Let me tell you, this is how cool it was. I do want to talk about how he ended up on our show. I got invited. I go to Black Hat every year, and it's a big security conference in Vegas. I go every year, and I got invited through because I've had a relationship with this company because we've been a customer of theirs for years, from my past company, and I hope at my new company that we're going to be a customer again. And I was just a big fan of the product, a big fan of their customer service and the company itself. And I got invited to breakfast. It's like, yeah, I'll go to breakfast, thinking that it's going to be a table of 20, this long row with 20 other, schmoes like me.
It's typically what it is, right?
Yeah. I was like, I'll go, even if I can get a couple minutes words edgewise. It ends up just being me and him and like the EA or the marketing person. And I was like, oh my God, This is like, what do I say?
Was it an accident?
I didn't bring it up.
Was there an error in the scheduling?
Honestly,
did they know it was you?
Dude,
there's a whole bunch of questions I have actually that I'm gonna pop into the
I thought that. So. I was looking around going, wait, it's just us? Holy crap. Yeah. So anyway, but it was fantastic conversation we had over breakfast for a good half hour, 45 minutes, and just range of topics that I'm like, I got to get this guy on the show. So it was almost like a date when you're like, first date, you wanted to ask for the second date. I was like, I'm going to ask him, Dean, you ever thought, would you come on my podcast? He was like over the moon. He's like, absolutely. I'd love to be on it. So, and I just gave his name. So I'm just going to kick it off. Please welcome Dean Sysman. He is the co-founder and CEO of a company called Axonius.
Oh, welcome.
Hi. I don't know how to react now to all this totally over-promising, overselling introduction, but I'm very grateful to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, dude.
And Jason's never done that. Never, ever. So, yeah.
I don't think I ever have given this much of a props to
No,
it.
you haven't. Actually, no, I'm actually being very serious. This is a lot of fanfare.
Yeah,
so.
and in a later episode,
No pressure, Dean.
In a later,
no pressure, Dean.
In a later episode this season, we're going to have our wives on this show, so I may have to build my wife up a little bit more than I did you. Just I'm going to put that out.
Let's hope she doesn't see this episode, by the way, but that's a whole different conversation.
Yeah, right. Anyways, so one of the topics, I mentioned at breakfast, we're at Black Hat, and my experience, the company's called Axonius. It is a chasm, or started. I should probably shut up and let Dean talk a little bit more to tell you what the company is before I get it all screwed up. But there's an acronym known as CHASM that I'm going to ask about later. And I use the product. It's awesome. It's been such a fast growth company from when it started how many years ago, Dean?
About 5.5 now.
5.5 years ago. You're over $1 billion valuation, right? Yeah,
2.6.
2.6. Yeah, from 0 to 2.6 in 5 years. So it's a fast growth company. One of the things that I noticed, and I've seen this before in my experience working with vendors that go from like startup mode to fast growth, is you lose a lot of the customer service or that hand holding of that. You're a boutique and they really want your business because they're just starting out. We'll take it. We're going to help you get through our product and understand it. And that started, which was one of the things that my team loved, working with your customer support team, with figuring out how to implement, how to make the tool work for us. But it never diminished over the 3 to 4 years that we were with your company. And that came up, that question. I was like, Dean, how do you do that? And you said, oh, it's part of our company culture. And then that just got me to thinking, well, dude, how do you, and this is the question that I'm putting to you. So I'll shut up and you can start talking. How do you scale culture?
Yeah, it's incredibly simple answer. We can really cut down and give our time. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, it's a very complex topic, and I even think that for people outside of tech, this is my guess, they're sick of hearing that word around culture, because it seems like this buzzword that people say and nobody actually understands what it means. But I think the way for me to phrase it and how we've looked at it in our team is to really constantly ask yourself, why do you exist, right? Why do you have a reason to exist as an organization? And that can be in two factors. It can be, what do you bring to your customers, to your users? What kind of difference are you making in the market? And the other part is, what kind of difference are you making as an employer? Are people working for you because, that's their way of getting a paycheck, or are they working for you despite being able to get a bunch of other offers and work at other amazing organizations? Because obviously there's no shortage of amazing companies out there. And I think for us, from the beginning, it was very much about understanding all the time in a conscious and explicit way, why do we exist? And the reason for why we exist as a business to our customers was obvious to me, right? Once I experienced it, once I saw the problem that was happening, I was blown away that the security industry has gone that far and not solved that problem. And that's sort of the genesis of, like you had mentioned, the chasm category. But the other part was, we always knew, me and my co-founders, Abdul and Afri, when we started this company, that our goal was not to get acquired or to, grow to a certain short or near future time frame. We really wanted to look at a long-term future and a large, independent, potentially one of the biggest software companies in the world. And that takes many years. But how are we differentiating ourselves from any other place that can, that is another great software company that will, compete with us for the same employees? And really what we decided was that we're going to focus our entire culture around growth. And actually our company values are six words, there are the 6 letters of growth, right? Growth is the initials of it. Just like Linux and GNU, by the way, the first word in the initials is the word itself, it's growth. But we realized that one of the things that everybody wants out there in the market, whether it's a CISO, whether it's a sales guy who wants to work with us, whether it's an engineer, the one thing that we can differentiate ourselves is how much we help you progress in your career, how much we help you with your business objectives, how much we focus ourselves on that first and foremost, and everything extracts from there, whether it's business success or success as an employer. And that's really been the focus, because even the essence of the problem space that we're in, which is what we called cybersecurity asset management and what now Gartner calls CASM, is that it's something that you can't really measure, right? If you look at so many categories of products in the cybersecurity industry, if you meet a certain metric, right, like a certain number, you can claim to be the best. For example, in endpoint protection, your detection rate, or in firewall, your thorough rate, or in so many other things. There's a certain performance metric that you can say we're the best at that, we're the best product or best solution. But the problem that we solve, understanding what's in your infrastructure and leveraging your time to be able to solve those things at scale, there's no metric. The only metric is how much our users will say they benefit from the product. So if you have that way of measuring your own success, obviously you want to be extremely customer obsessed. And if the result is that a customer or a user is unhappy or doesn't see the value, that means essentially you don't have a reason to exist. There's no reason why they're using or buying your product. So
Dean,
I'll stop here. Yes.
Yeah, no. So Dean, there's a corollary between security, like CISOs, ensuring that they get the message of security built into the culture, right? That it's just part of what you do. It's not something you have to think about. It's just a normal muscle memory type of thing. And what you just described is, kind of how you pushed in the obsession with the customer for you. How do you measure that? And how do you ensure that, your obsession for the customer is relayed to people? Because as you get bigger and bigger, it's harder to find people who, can get behind that. And then what would you recommend to C-level executives on how they could help to really push their culture into the org?
Yeah, so I think it starts with what you measure, right? And what I said is very hard to measure, but the metric we use, for lack of a better one, is NPS, Net Promoter Score, which basically means you ask your customers, would you recommend this to people, ask if this is a good product? And then there's a way of calculating it. And it ebbs and flows. There's a lot of variance in it over time. But I can tell you, for us, our NPS has been usually in the 80 plus realm, which NPS is the scale that goes from, it doesn't go from 0 to 100, it goes from negative 100 to 100. So I have not seen a lot of products get over 80. The highest one I've heard of, I think, was Peloton at some point, was around the 90s. But I've never heard of any software product that is in the 80s.
I could rattle off a bunch that are in the negative.
Yeah.
Although we don't do that on this podcast. Thank you, Jason.
But yeah, and by the way, the reason it's so hard is because even if you have one detractor or one person who's, very, negatively influenced by the experience, they can drag the score way down, right? So I think a lot of businesses feel like they can focus on where their customers are happy, and that gives them motivation, that gives them happiness. But the paradoxical way to focus on happiness is to focus on why would somebody not be the best and most happiest customer, right? And really constantly ask them, what's preventing you from being in that state? What do you feel we need to do better? What do you feel we need to do more? And that's, by the way, something you do also internally, right? I start almost every single call with people internally with what could we have done better? Where did we not do things the right way? And maybe people get totally, tired from that, or they're sick of hearing it. But really, that mentality of where can we improve, I think, is what has helped us to get to that NPS. So that's the first part, measuring that and being really focused on NPS. And the second is ask the hard questions, right? That sort of goes back to what I was saying before. It's very common for us to see that we'll get someone as a customer, and as you guys know, the usual tenure for a CISO or people in the industry in general is not a decade plus, right? People move around organizations a lot, and you see them continue to reach out to us, right? Like they'll go to their next job and they'll say, "Hey, guys, I want you to talk to this new organization." And the funny part is when that doesn't happen, we try and reach out to that person and ask them, "Hey, you were happy here. You went to this.
What about us?"
Like, really, give us some feedback. And many times you'll get an answer that doesn't depend on us, right? They'll say, "Oh, wait, I might be still settling in, or I'm still figuring out other parts of my strategy." Or people might just be polite and not tell you the real reason. But it's really that unstopping focus on finding where you're not doing a good job and improving that.
Do you formalize this? Like, is this in formal training of new employees or new people you're bringing on? So it goes from you're up at the top of the CEO, and then you got the frontline people that are actually dealing with the customer day to day. How do you scale that training or that message? Like,
yeah. So first, we're very, it's a very difficult question, by the way. It's really hard. Like you said in the beginning, Jason, like the larger an organization grows, it's really hard to convey that and have that, consistently be a part of every person's interaction. But first of all, we talk a lot about it deliberately, right? We talk about what does our culture mean for you as an employee, but also for our customers. And when people talk to me about culture, most of the time what they think about is like, what kind of events you guys do, like employee off.
Yeah, that's not culture, right? Yeah.
You give more unlimited PTO and all that. I'm like, no, culture is what happens when your customer has a crisis at 8 p.m. on a Saturday. That's culture. What do you decide to do at that moment? That's the real measure of culture, right? And we talk a lot about that, what that means for us as an organization. And we do that in front of everybody, right? We have an all hands once a month. Every all hands I start by talking about our values and really asking people, where do you see them manifest? Where do you see them being efficient? And constantly being, actually one of those values is the relentless pursuit of the truth. That's the growth, that's the R in growth. And we call that relentless pursuit of the truth because first, the truth is constantly changing, right? You can never achieve it. But more than anything is you have to be relentless to find it, right? Because people, the most important facts, the most important feelings, experiences, people will not share unless you're relentless about understanding it. And you're giving them the ability to share. You're giving them the right, comfortable, enabling environment and forum to be able to share that. Whether it's a conversation internally or externally, right? And I think, I'll give you another example. This all sounds like very nice and makes sense. But where does the cost in that happen? It's when we get a person who's customer facing, right? It could be a sales rep, could be an engineer. We get them through a pitch certification process, meaning they have to go through sort of a mock pitch, how they, talk about our product, how they show the demo of it. And they have to do that with, their management chain all the way up to me, right? And they can't talk to a customer by themselves if they haven't passed it. Now, every single person in our company that now is talking to a customer has been certified by me. I literally went through either doing it with them or saw a recording of them doing it, and I approved it. And I said, okay, they know their stuff well enough to talk to a customer. And
wow, that scales? Is that going to scale?
No, I was going to actually, yeah. So that's one question.
Wow.
Yes, we've changed it over the years to make it more scalable, right?
Yeah.
I used to do it one-on-one with every single person. Now I just see the recordings and then I approve or give feedback. But the reason it's important is because, to me, whenever, and by the way, this is how we start our conversations with customers. We start by saying, hey, thank you for giving me 30 or 60 or whatever minutes of your day. We know you're incredibly busy. What was your justification that it's worth your time to talk to us, right? Like, why is it, how can we make best use of your time to show you how to get to where you want to go? Because you're talking to us for whatever reason. You have a problem, you have an incident, you want to move to the next level of progress or scale, whatever it is. And we need to treat it with that level of respect, right? We need to practice and train and try and challenge each other. Did we answer correctly? Did we give the wrong idea? Did we confuse the customer? Did we waste their time? Those things to me are inexcusable because of the level of respect we should be having in our culture to the time of our customers and our users.
And what do you look for when you look at how people talk about, because I'm thinking of a corollary, like, in a corporate environment, you have your team who will often speak without you, right? Talk about your program, talk about what you do. What are some of the qualities that you look for in the recordings that you saw or the people you interviewed? Like, are you looking for passion? Are you looking, accuracy clearly is going to be one of them, but what are the key things that, you just focus on?
Yeah. Great question. I hope I'm not answering in too much of a cliched manner, but I'll try and be as practical as possible. The first thing is that they listen. Okay, and I'm hitting a pause here just to emphasize how important this is. That they don't talk. First, listen. And it's a little like, what's so innovative about that idea? I will tell you, I've been, sorry, it's my dog whining in the background.
Your dog agrees.
Sorry, but I'll tell you that it's incredibly rare to find people who listen. And what do I mean by that? We have, guys, when you go on a customer call and you ask that question, that initial question, right? Like, why did you spend time with us? That answer needs to be something that you use during the call, right? Like, you're not asking that for, like, okay, the person answers and whatever.
Dude, that is so true. I have so many vendors will ask me, like, so tell me about your problems you're trying to solve. And then honestly, you never hear it again. It's just that part of their script that they just know they got to read. And then they start talking about themselves and their own product. And it has nothing to do with what they asked in the beginning. That's true.
So, for example, if you do not use the answer that they gave you to address, the time that you have, we won't, you'll have to do it again, because that's listening, right? Like, take what somebody told you and show them you're customizing or tailoring the information, the experience, the time for what they care about. And if you show them you care about them, they will care about you, and they will handle it in the exact same manner, right?
Yeah, so that's good for security people too, I think, right? Because often we'll go into meetings with the prepared policies and standards and say, okay, here's the standard. But, if someone starts to tell you a little bit about the problem, well, here's the standard, right? If you listen to the whole thing, you can actually discover, wait a minute, there's another way than the standard. So that's actually a good thing for, I think, security professionals to do, is make sure you're listening to what's being asked of you before you respond, because it's very easy just to say, well, the standard's right here, go look at it, or no, right, is another answer.
Yeah, and it's funny, and people always ask, like, for example, on this podcast or in others, when people ask me, how will a company be successful in cyber or whatever, and I tell them it's really, really, like, the way to measure it is really simple, but the way to achieve it is really difficult, obviously. The way to measure it is you got to solve a very painful problem. You got to do it in a very, economically worthwhile way. And you got to give a great customer experience. You do those three things, you're going to be a successful company. It's like really that part is really simple. Like how to do those things, that's a whole other story.
You just nailed why Axonius was so successful in my eyes with my organization when we implemented, because you solved the hardest problem, which is critical control number 1 and 2. Know what's on your network and know what's running on your network. And nobody's ever solved that in hundreds of years. It's been the bane of my existence. And then along comes this product that's like, hey, okay, we got it. We're in. And then it's the customer service that kept me coming back, right? And kept me, kept our team engaged and not, because now you're going to get other competitors coming into that space. Were you actually I have this question. Were you the first mover in this space? Were you the first one to do cyber asset management?
So,
or close to it?
Great question. So when this started with me, and I've told this story many times before. Before Axonius, I was working with a very large company that was hacked by, a Chinese state threat actor. And we found which computer was the infection point, or at least one of them. And we couldn't find out why that computer was there. Nobody knew who owned it. Nobody knew why it was in the network. And that led me on a path of realizing that the fundamentals, just like you said, the CIS 1 and 20, knowing to a level of confidence, what's the hardware and what's the software that you own, was something that the more CISOs or CIOs or CTOs I would ask, I would realize nobody's really confident about it. The fundamentals are called that way because everything else needs to be built on top of them, whether it's a building or a security program. And if you have shaky foundations, it's going to be risky.
It was the last thing I wanted to do as CISO, which happened all the time, I think, until this, Chasm. Gartner, by the way, did Gartner call you and say, hey, we want to call it Chasm? Did they all reach out to you to what they're going to call it, or did they just go ahead and call it?
So I'll tell you, when we started, when I talked to people about this problem, there were all these other things that were claiming to solve it, right? First, there was this category called ITS management, right? That's based on agents and like device life cycle and all of that. There was also the network approach, right? Like the network scanning tools that will tell you how you can scan your network and show your inventory. And we knew those approaches are a piece of the puzzle, and they're definitely going to solve less and less of the problem as we continue to be more fragmented in our infrastructure and use more and more types of computing, right? But what I really wanted to get at is, what do you call this? So when we build this, you'll get to us. And they said, well, look, we call it asset management, but it's not IT asset management. That's not what it does. So, me and my head of marketing, Nate, who was our first marketing hire and is still, our chief marketing officer, I remember that day we said online and we started throwing around ideas for what we call this category. And we looked up on Google cybersecurity asset management. And there was like 3 results, and none of them were like by accident. Somebody wrote that combination of words. And we said, okay, we're going to call this cybersecurity asset management. And when we did, nobody else was doing this. Nobody else was calling it that way. Gartner, we've had conversations with them, but one day they come out and tell us,
Chasm.
It's called Chasm. They wanted to add attack surface to those initials, right? So it's like cybersecurity asset attack surface management, which takes 10 seconds to say. But that's, Gartner are the experts on naming categories. Literally, that's their expertise. So we're just happy that we're getting more recognition and people are more aware that there is a solution to the problem. Because I think every single organization suffers from this pain, and there is a solution for it. It's just a matter of knowing about it and implementing it.
Yeah, at my organization, until we implemented the Chasm solution that your company has, it was always, okay, we had to pick up a phone and talk to a person to confirm that asset of who was on it, who owns it, where it is. Even in AWS, we'd be like, oh, well, we can't see it. So let's contact the owner of that account and say, hey, who on your team owns that EC2 or what's it doing? And that's what, Axonius, that's 1 and 2 just absolutely solved. So well done. Hey, I have one last question because it's more of I want you to tell the story. So if you go to Dean's LinkedIn site, you're going to see in the backdrop, you go to any Axonius, you're going to see a picture of one of the greatest Olympic athletes of all time, Simone Biles. Tell our listeners, how did Axonius and how does that tie in to someone as awesome as Simone Biles?
Yeah. So I'll start with saying, I think I'm not saying anything surprising or shocking by that. There's a lot of negativity in our industry. And when I mean negativity, I mean people who look at mistakes or failures in a way of completely, judging that person and mocking, the situation. And really, I remember, for example, when the Equifax breach happened, I remember people saying that, the CISO at that time, she had a music degree. That was her, bachelor's. And they said, wow, like who on earth thought that this would be a good idea to hire a CISO that has a bachelor's in music? And when I saw that, I was like, wow, that's really wrong, right? Like making people be judged to that level of your every part about you is a superficial way to measure whether you're a good security industry career person or leader. Now, she could have been, I'm not judging her performance. What I said was looking at it from that perspective to me was totally wrong. Yeah. And there are so many areas in life where you look at someone who's trying to achieve something incredibly complex and hard. And if they fail, you do not cancel them, right? Like you do not say, oh, that person has no way of meeting the requirements of what you're trying to do. What you do is you look at how complex what they're trying to do is, and you learn from their failures, or you learn from how they handled that situation. And I think sports is one of the biggest ones of them, right? Like if Michael Jordan lost a game, you wouldn't say, oh, he shouldn't even be on a basketball court. Like that guy has no idea what he's doing. And me and our CMO, Nate, we really wanted to think about how do we bring that controlling complexity mentality, right? How do we make people feel that what we try and promote, what we think is the right mentality for both, ourselves and our industry, is that complexity is there, and it's all about being there for each other to help ourselves feel we can be in control within the complexities of what we do. And that was very recently after what happened in the Olympics. And we had this crazy idea, and we said, like, who exemplifies controlling complexity better than Simone Biles? And we decided to try and get her to be to have her be sponsoring that.
How do you even do that? Did you slip in on our DMs or just like sending her mass emails? She probably doesn't even answer emails, or do they all have agents that you talk to?
Yeah, so I will say it's like sales. It's this sort of trivial on paper process, but it's incredibly complex to pull off. And I'll give all the credit to my CMO, Nathan. Axonius is the amazing place that it is, not because of me or any kind of crazy smart ideas or decisions. It's because of the amazing people who do the job that got us to where we are and got you to where you are when you were a user of it. So all credit to Nate. He did an amazing job getting that together. And I'll tell you that that I think is also a very important part of culture. If you really feel that you give people ownership and motivation to achieve things that don't seem likely, right? And you fail a lot of times if you have that objective, but without having that, you'll never achieve something spectacular.
Man, that's awesome. That's a great story. Well, Dean, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for being on the show. For listeners, I just want to point out something is he just gave a great lesson in leadership and humility where number one, you give credit to the team. And that's exactly what he did. You're like, hey, it's not me, man. It's my entire team that allowed for this. And I love that. Any leader that can do that is, big high five. So thank you, Dean, for being on. Paul, any last comments?
No, I just want to thank you for everything you've done that has made this podcast so successful, Jason. You've been amazing at it. It's all credit to you.
Oh, man, I did not set up that line.
You did set it up. It feels like you set me up where I had to say no.
And let me show you how not to handle that. Of course it's me. It's all me.
Yes,
me, I. I'm kidding.
But
Awesome.
no, Dean, thank you for your time and telling us a little bit about how to make things part of the culture, because I think it's really hard to make it just part of DNA. It's easy to talk about things day in and day out, but actually making it part of how people think is very, very important.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks, man.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Is the elephant in